Yeah, yeah. Pro Fan Sports Podcast. Let's get it. Pro fan, tune into the program. Every single week, get the dope, fam. Sean on the mic, very flat too. Keep you updated, that's what we do. Pro fans, tune into the program. Pro fans, tune into the program. Pro fans, tune into the program. Every single week, get the dope, fam.
All right, welcome everybody to episode 69 to the Pro Fan Sports Podcast. We have with us a special guest, Jayking. He is a reporter for The Athletic for the Boston Celtics. He's also the co-host of the Anything is Portable podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Jay.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, no problem. Absolutely. Thanks for coming on and being here with us today. We're excited and looking forward to this episode and to have you on to talk some hoops and some Celtics. So yeah, let's get to it and and have a good show today.
Awesome. So as everybody can see, it's only Barry and I right now. John should be joining us later. But we'll go ahead and get started and have a quick conversation with Jay about the Celtics and how he feels about the state of the Celtics. To get started, Jay, I just wanted to ask you a very general question. I mean, what's the state of the Celtics now with a new coach, a new GM? What do you think about the state of the Celtics?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot has changed. Starting with Danny Ainge stepping down, Brad Stevens stepping up, the hire of Ime Udoka, the trade of Kemba Walker. I think it's clear after a 500 season that the Celtics, they knew they needed to change at least a little bit. And I think they see Udoka as a new voice, a fresh voice. I have a theory that Brad kind of sees Udoka as like Brad 2.0, like has a lot of the same traits, but probably a little tougher, definitely a little tougher. Probably going to be a little harder on the players than Brad was. Certainly has more of a history of playing in the NBA than Brad did. Yeah. And then I think, with the Kemba Walker trade, like they needed to get rid of some money. They needed a little bit more financial flexibility. And then to get Al Horford in that deal and get someone that they could use and someone who brings them playmaking, passing, and shooting that they need, especially at that big position, then I think they consider that important too. But they still have a lot to figure out. They still have to reload the supporting cast. They still have to decide whether to re-sign Evan Fournier. They still have to decide, what to do with Marcus Smart, who's entering the final year of his current contract. So Brad Stevens still has a lot of work cut out for him the rest of the offseason.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely, he sure does.
But do you think that first move by Brad Stevens, trading Kemba and getting Al Horford, do you think that was a great move by him?
Yeah, I think they kind of needed to do that because if you look at the salary cap, their salary cap situation, if they had not done that and if Kemba had stayed, then they would have had to make some other cost-cutting move. Yeah. And so to go out and get Al Horford, like at this stage, he's probably not quite as productive as Kemba Walker, but you could make the argument that he fits better next to Tatum and Brown. He definitely makes less money. It could help them re-sign Evan Fournier. It should definitely help them, rebuild a supporting cast, which they needed more depth after last season, especially all the injuries that they went through. And so, that was just the first move, I think, for Brad Stevens to try to kind of reestablish a supporting cast around Tatum and Brown. They've lost a lot of talent over the last few years with Kyrie Irving, now Kemba Walker, Gordon Hayward, and so they kind of need to reload talent-wise, and obviously they have two franchise cornerstones in Tatum and Brown, but I think the roster has a lot of question marks around them, and even compared to where it was, 2 years ago when Kemba was healthy and Gordon Hayward was still in town, Like this team isn't as talented as it was then. So they have to figure out what to do with Fournier. They have to figure out, the right pieces to put around Tatum and Brown, not just for this year, but for down the road, because, eventually those guys are going to need to decide what to do for their futures. And by then, there will be a lot of pressure on the Celtics to have a better team around those guys, to give them a chance to contend, to give them a chance to win championships in Boston.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just gonna say, speaking of, trying to, replace the talent that has left us in, the last couple years, how do you see them filling the hole of the, point guard position, with Kemba Walker being, traded to OKC, and now there being a pretty big, hole at point guard? How do you see them, addressing that this offseason?
Yeah, I think they could go out and pursue another starting caliber point guard. But to me, the answer is already on the roster. To me, it's Marcus Smart. I think obviously Marcus Smart wouldn't be an elite scorer at that position. But if you look at historically, when Smart has played point guard for the Celtics, their defense has been unbelievable. And I think with Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Robert Williams and Al Horford and Tristan Thompson, I think the Celtics have a chance to build a really physical, really versatile defense. And I think if you have Marcus Smart at point guard, then you can be big, you can be long, you can be tough. And that to me is going to be the most important. And obviously it would be a downgrade from Kemba to Marcus Smart, playmaking wise, scoring wise, all of that. But Smart led the team in assists last year. He's a very good passer. And I think, Tatum has shown that more and more of the offense should probably run through him, and more and more of the offense will probably run through him. And I think, as he continues to grow into those responsibilities, you're not necessarily going to need a high usage point guard. And so I think Marcus Smart's the answer. I could see the argument for getting someone, more experienced at running a team, maybe someone who can shoot a little better. But to me, like, if they want to build a defense first identity, and I think that's always how Brad Stevens has wanted to play. I think from Ime Udoka's reputation, that's probably how he's going to want to coach. Then starting with Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, and Jayson Tatum as your three perimeter guys is a really good start.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think especially with Ime Udoka's background, I think he has a defensive background. I think he's most likely to stick with Smart and use him in that role. But earlier you mentioned Brad Stevens looking at Ime Udoka as Brad 2.0. What is the team gonna look like with Ime as the head coach? I'm assuming it's gonna be a more defensive based team, but what does the offense look like? What is that gonna look like? Because we know he has experience in San Antonio and Brooklyn, but this is a new team with different players. What is that gonna look like?
Yeah, I think, based on what I've gathered from his press conference and what I've learned about him, he's going to definitely want a really tough defense. Probably every coach does, right?
Yeah.
But with his experience in San Antonio and based on what he said at his press conference, he's also going to want a team that moves the ball. And one stat that he brought up during his press conference was that the Celtics finished 27th in assists last year. And he doesn't think that's going to cut it. And so I think bringing Al Horford in is a big part of that. They like, when you look at their bigs last year, Robert Williams was far and away their best passer at that position. And they didn't really have a second playmaking hub there. And so to add Al Horford, who doesn't just have the passing, but also gives you the shooting and gives you the threat in that way, he's just going to make everything easier for Tatum and Brown. And so I think they're going to have probably a more free-flowing offense. And I don't think that's just because, going from Brad to Udoka or anything like that. I just think that Horford allows you to do things that last year's Celtics couldn't. Yeah. And then, yeah, I think, the most important stat to me from all last season was that the Celtics defense, after years of being either elite or close to it, slipped all the way to 13th in defensive efficiency. And that was even though they brought back a number of guys that were part of really good defenses. I think part of that was just they were young. You know, they were playing Peyton Pritchard. They were playing Aaron Nesmith. They were playing Grant Williams. They were playing a lot of guys without a lot of experience. And they were injured. And, you know, they had obviously some pretty important COVID-19 cases that kind of lingered and hurt them a lot. The most important thing for them, I think, is reestablishing that defensive identity, tapping back into the toughness and the commitment on that end that the best teams under Brad show. You know, for all the grief that Brad got last year, his teams were almost always great at defense. And his teams, no matter who played for them, really, were almost always great at defense. That stopped last year, and Udoka's got to reinstill that in the team, in the locker room, and kind of really focus on that. That's the most important part to me.
Yeah,
for sure.
I agree, and I really hope that happens, because last year, I think for me last year, the lack of effort was just unacceptable. I think there was a lot of time the guys were on the court, you just could tell they were okay with losing the game, and that was just unacceptable. Welcome to the podcast, John. Thanks for joining us. We have been talking to Jay about the new coach and the new GM, and how that's all gonna work. I'm gonna pass it on to you if you had any questions, and you can say hi to Jay.
All right, my bad, fellas. Went back to work, and first day back in the office, so I found out, what the traffic was like, a year back into the office. So, Jay, thank you for being on the show, man. Really appreciate
thanks for having me, man.
I was
got to deal with so much traffic.
Yeah, I was reading your article on Jayson Tatum out there on The Athletic, and you talked about, what it's going to be like for him being out there trying to recruit players, right? And it seems to me that, Jayson Tatum, he's in the starting lineup now. He seems to be a guy that's answering a lot of questions. Are they, preparing him for something?
I don't know if they're preparing him for something, but I do think he's going to play a very big role on Team USA. If you listen to Greg Popovich talk about him, even dating back to 2 years ago when Tatum played on that World Cup team in 2019, Popovich is really, really high on Tatum's skill set. He thinks he's a really good defender on top of being a top-notch scorer. He thinks Tatum can be one of the best two-way players in the world. And I think, beyond Kevin Durant, beyond Damian Lillard, I think it's Tatum, it's Bradley Beal on that team. And obviously, losing to Nigeria, tough start for Team USA. But I think Tatum can really grow from that experience. And you're talking about practicing with Kevin Durant every day. You're talking about watching Damian Lillard, watching his shooting drills every day, how he approaches that. And so I think over the years, you've seen a lot of guys go to Team USA and kind of come back the next year and get that Team USA bump because of competing against those guys, because of seeing what it takes to push your game to the next level. And I think for the Celtics, that's the most exciting part, is that Tatum could really, really benefit from that experience.
Yeah, one thing I'm seeing is that, in having to answer all these questions, and it seems like in a lot of their promos, he's in the forefront of everything, getting that leadership role kind of, in a team like that with everybody around him. I think that really can help him to come on to, back with the Celtics with that experience and, have a little more confidence with his role.
Yeah, I think, that confidence, when you talk about that, he just averaged 30 points per game against Kevin Durant in a playoff series.
Yeah.
And then after that, I don't know if you guys saw the podcast where Kevin Durant just kind of really hyped up Tatum and said, he put him on a list of guys that he really considers, one of the better players, one of the more talented guys that he's played against, and really sees great things in Tatum. So I know that stuff means a lot to Tatum, and I know that getting the respect of a guy like Kevin Durant, who, he's obviously looked up to like a lot of guys have over the years, his confidence should be really high already. And obviously it's weird to talk about a guy's confidence when he averaged 26, 27 points a game, whatever it was last season. But I do think there's another level for him to reach. And part of that is, being more physical. Part of that is drawing more free throws. Part of it is just being more confident in who he is. And I do think a lot of people would have looked at his last season a lot differently if he hadn't gotten COVID, because when he came back from that for a month, he really struggled. And he couldn't breathe right. If you look at his numbers outside of that, he was so much better. And so I expect a big, big year out of him. I expect him to continue climbing the list of best players in the NBA. I see him as really like one of the premier young talents in the NBA. And I think his place on Team USA and how, Popovich is playing him and giving him such a big role, I think that's all a sign of what's to come for Jayson Tatum.
And what do you think? What do you think of his interaction with Ime Udoka on Team USA? How do you think that's gonna help him in the upcoming year?
Yeah, I think that can only help. Just building a bond before you go to practice, before you start training camp, and so several of the Celtics players, including Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Tatum, they've already known Udoka dating back to their time with Team USA in 2019. Peyton Pritchard has known Udoka since he was a kid in Portland. Al Horford played a year under Udoka. So a lot of guys have relationships with him. And I think that's going to help him walk into the locker room with respect. I think also the coaching staff that he's putting together, it's really exciting. Will Hardy, he was with the Spurs for a long time. He's gotten head coaching interviews at a number of different places. He's regarded as one of the brightest young coaching stars in the league. So to get him was a really big hire. And then Damon Stoudamire, who obviously has a lot of playing experience, obviously had a big name when he was a player, and then, turned around the University of Pacific and turned them from 8-20 to 23-10. He was a West Coast Conference Coach of the Year in 2019. So I think his coaching staff has started off with two big hires, and then Udoka is a guy that no matter who you talk to, he's just someone that players and people and his coaches back when he was a player, they all have a lot of respect for him and the way he approaches everything. So I think it'll help that he and Tatum have this time. But obviously, like there's a lot for them to accomplish over the years.
Yeah, I saw some highlights of Damon Stoudamire, just talking to his teams and, the way he was giving his players direction and everything like that, trying to take them to the next level. What is he going to bring into this team this year?
Yeah, I think he's just a guy who's been through it, and when you've done that as a player, when you've reached heights and when you face the scrutiny that some of the top players face, it all helps. And so he'll be able to relate to guys. He should be able to have, some sympathy for what they're going through. He should be able to help them get through what they're going through. And I think Udoka's the same way. He was never a star player like Stoudamire was for part of his career, but Udoka had to cling to make it to the NBA. He had to cling to stay there. And he's a guy who, his work ethic, everybody talks about that. His toughness, everybody talks about that. And his intelligence, everybody talks about that. So I think, having guys with NBA experience should matter. And as good as Brad was and as talented a coach as Brad was, he never had that. And I don't think it matters for everything. I think you can be a great coach without NBA playing experience. But when Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown are going through things that, not everybody's seen, because, how many guys have seen a young star rise and get to all-star level, but then face a ton of criticism because their team doesn't live up to it. And so there are a lot of things that Tatum and Brown are going through, and I think having a couple of guys with a lot of NBA experience who have seen a lot of different things can only help.
Absolutely, I agree with that for sure. And I didn't
Yeah.
know too much about Will Hardy, so it's good to hear that, we got some top of the line candidates in the house, especially, because it seems like these guys are getting hired and hiring other coaches to coach under them. So it's pretty good to know that right there. What about Jaylen Brown? I know he left the season with the wrist injury, and I think I've seen him on like Jimmy Kimmel or something like that, shooting
Yep.
a basketball.
Yeah.
Is he healed? Like, what's going on with him?
So when he had his surgery toward the end of the season, the Celtics said it would take 3 months for him to resume basketball activities. Obviously, it was a good sign. He was shooting around on Jimmy Kimmel. And I think for him, it was a left hand, so it wasn't the shooting hand. It's a little different than Romeo Langford, who had a similar surgery, but on his shooting hand. So hopefully it won't be as difficult for Jaylen Brown to recover. But I still do think that's an injury that could kind of hinder his offseason, limit the work that he does this offseason. But he's a guy who has really improved no matter what. And you look at last offseason, Celtics didn't really have an offseason. It was like a month and a half between when they were in the bubble and when they came back and started training camp. And I remember reporters asking Jaylen, like, how'd you improve this much? Like, what'd you work on this offseason? He's like, we didn't really have an offseason. So it didn't really come from that. It was just
Yeah.
like he got more confident. He got more different types of opportunities and just kind of ran with it. And so I still think there's another level for him to reach. And I think he started to reach that last year. If you look at the last couple of months of his season, he really started to extend his game to the three-point arc. He started taking close to 10 3-pointers per game, which I think will be really important to open the court for him, open the court for Jayson Tatum, and help make the Celtics a more efficient offense. And so I think we've seen the start of his improvement in that area. I think he can only grow in that regard. And I think he and Tatum are going to be very dangerous for a long time for the Celtics.
Right. I was reading a lot of people are saying trade uh Jaylen Brown for, Damian Lillard. And I've seen people say, things like these guys haven't even reached their prime yet. So I definitely like to see them, be together a little longer than everybody in Boston is trying to, make it out to be. But I did also see that you wrote an article about, some of the things that could shape success for the Celtics season, I believe. Um, what are some of those things, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think, number one for them is kind of shaping the rest of the supporting cast. We saw last year that they weren't deep enough, and obviously they dealt with a lot of injuries. They dealt with a lot of absences and some really important absences. Kemba Walker was missing every back-to-back. Marcus Smart missed a month and a half. Like, a lot of their players went through a lot of different stuff. So I do think they need to address their depth somehow. I think that could be just re-signing Evan Fournier, bringing back, maybe signing a backup point guard. TJ McConnell would fit the mold.
I've heard his name a lot.
Yeah, I think that's just because he would kind of fit the mold of a guy the Celtics could presumably afford and would make a lot of sense for kind of what they need. But it could just be young guys getting better. And I think there's reason for optimism with Aaron Nesmith after the way he played toward the end of last season. It was really hard for him. It was really hard for Peyton Pritchard as rookies last year because they didn't get summer league. They didn't get nearly as much time as most rookies do to go to Boston, learn from the coaches, and kind of, immerse yourself in the NBA world. They basically just got thrown right into training camp.
Yeah.
And Aaron Nesmith in particular hadn't played 5-on-5 since January of his last season in college because of an injury that he suffered in college. And so I think it took him a lot of time to get comfortable at the NBA level. It took him a lot of time to get his sea legs. And once he did, he was a lot better. And so I think as you look at what they need to do, if he takes a step forward, that's important. If Romeo Langford takes a step forward, that's important. if Peyton Pritchard does, if Robert Williams does, that could all go a long way towards solidifying the Celtics depth chart. But I also think, they need to be active looking for veteran influences that can just continue to take more of the pressure off Tatum and Brown. I thought last year, and they'll learn from it, but last year, so much of the playmaking burden was on them. So much of the scoring burden was on them. And I think I don't want to say it was unfair to those guys because they're the two all-stars. And at the end of the day, like a lot of the team's success falls on them. But, they were two guys, they were never really relied upon as playmakers before last year.
Right.
Tatum was a little bit the year before, but that was always one of their weaknesses. And then last year, they really had to grow and handle a lot more of that. And they probably didn't have enough help in that regard. And so I think Brad Stevens needs to be smart about the types of additions he makes to their roster to help those guys and to fit those guys better than maybe last year's roster did. Because as good as Tatum and Brown were, I didn't think the roster accentuated them as best as it could. I think they need to get bigger. I think they need to get more shooting. I think they need more passing. And I think they've started to address that with the Al Horford acquisition. I think with, if they keep Fournier, that will be obviously another big addition for scoring and shooting and a little bit of ball handling. But, I think that over the next couple of years, transforming that roster to go from that young, inexperienced, thin group that they had last year to, guys that you can trust all the time and that the coach isn't searching all the time for a different solution. I think that's really important. And so, I do think Brad Stevens has his work cut out for him because they have a tough salary cap situation. They don't have a ton of flexibility, and they do need to make tweaks to that supporting cast to fit better around Tatum and Brown and help lift those guys to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. Wanted to ask you, Jay, it's going to be interesting, particularly this offseason, to see how Brad Stevens does as a GM because he has never really been, a GM, before, with his, days of coaching, not only the Celtics, but in Butler before. So how do you think, he'll be as a GM? Do you think he's capable of, being a successful GM, with the, Celtics, moving forward? And then what led to, Danny Ainge leaving the Celtics as far as, what kind of went wrong with, with him towards the end of his time, as the Celtics GM?
Yeah, so I think Brad is well equipped to handle that job. I think obviously he's really smart when it comes to basketball, and obviously he knows what that Celtics roster needs. I think the other part of it that will really help him when it comes to GM is I think it's a different skill set, sort of as you have to, manage all the people in the organization, not just the people on the team. And I think one of his skills beyond the X's and O's is he can get along with any type of person. Like Brad is very, very good at relating to people. He's very good at connecting with people. And I think, working with a first-time head coach in Udoka, I think he'll be great at empowering him. I think he'll be the type of guy who, when Brad made this joke at his press conference, but I think it's true that, he's looking forward to one of the, the first big loss that they have, and just inviting Udoka to have a coffee and a beer and just say, you know what, like, we're going to be okay. Everything's going to be all right, man. And so I think Brad will be that type of leader in his new role. As far as the Danny Ainge stuff, I think the last 2 years were really tough on not just the Celtics, but the entire NBA. But when you go through the bubble, and they were in the bubble for 3.5, 4 months, they were away from the families. From Ainge's perspective, he wasn't able to go and scout games. He loved to do that. He wasn't able to watch games on TV with the rest of his staff, which he loves. And I think there were just a lot of pieces of just normal life that we're missing because of how strange the past 2 seasons have been. And even this past year, like the COVID protocols were so strict that, you know, guys weren't allowed to go to restaurants on the road. Like they basically had to stay in their hotel rooms on the road. And it was just a very different lifestyle than anyone's used to living. And so I think that weighed on a lot of guys. And I think Ainge was one of those. And I think the team going 500 didn't help, and all the criticism didn't help. And, you know, Danny pointed to the health scare he had a couple years back when he had his second heart attack as kind of a turning point for him. And I do think that when you go through something like that, it can really change you. And so, you know, it's a tough job. It's a job with a lot of pressure. It's a job with a lot of criticism. And you know, in Danny's case, like he went through 5 years of making almost every right move. And then, you know, the last couple of years were a little tougher for the team. The last couple of years, a bunch of free agents left. And Danny, I think he'd be the first one to tell you he didn't do as good a job. And all that stuff just kind of weighed on him, I think, and helped convince him to step down from his role. And I was shocked when Brad stepped in for him, though. I'm not gonna lie, I did not see that one coming.
Yeah.
I don't think we did either, and at least for myself, I didn't.
Do you think we're gonna see Danny at another
Utah,
position for another team?
It wouldn't shock me if he ends up in Utah. I think if he does do it, it would probably be in like a Jerry West type consultant role rather than the GM role that he's had. Yeah, he's a guy who's super competitive, you know, like when you're around the game for so long and you're in the game for so long, like that's been his life. He's either been a coach, a commentator, a player since the 70s, the 80s. So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets back into it. But I do think it would be in a lesser role, something that wouldn't necessarily be as difficult, as time consuming as being, you know, a president of basketball operations for an organization.
Absolutely, man. Before we continue, man, if you're watching this right now, please make sure you're subscribing, because we're talking to Jayking, the staff writer for The Athletic, covering the Boston Celtics.
Just to let you know, John, Jay has to go around 5:45 or so.
5:45, man. Yeah. You know, that no better time to tell him that right now. You know what I mean? Co-host Matt's Live for the last 5 years. And you also, that's where I actually first heard Jayking was on the Locked On podcast with John Corrales, man. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to start my own podcast. So I've been listening to this guy for a while. You know.
Oh, thanks, man. That's
yeah. One thing I did want to ask, I saw you get a lot of mailbags and stuff like that. A lot of people are asking about young Madar. And I saw you did an article about him and how he's relentless and, you know, he has a high motor and things like that. Well, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I think he's an interesting prospect. He's, for a 20-year-old, he began the last year at 19 in the top league in Israel and really had a good year. And I think, you know, when you look at the prospects who play in that league, it's very rare to average 16 points and 5 assists like he did at that age in the Israeli league. So I don't know when he'll come to the NBA. I'm not sure the Celtics know yet. But, you know, at 20 years old, a draft and stash guy from last season, he's definitely got some athleticism. He's definitely got some spunk, and he's definitely got some confidence. And he's a developing shooter. He went from, really, that was the biggest knock on him when the Celtics drafted him, to shooting more than 40% this past season. So, yeah, I recently spoke to John Diebler, the former Ohio State legend, who was one of Madar's teammates in Israel. And he just kind of said, you know, no matter what, the moment wasn't too big for him. And for such a young guy, Diebler was really, really impressed with the way he handled himself, the way he wanted the ball in key moments, and just the confidence with which he played. So Diebler sounded really impressed by him, and seems like he's really a fan. And I mean, we'll see how he develops, but he's definitely an interesting guy, and I know Celtics fans love checking out his highlight. He's got a fun game.
Oh, I've checked him out, man. He looks pretty good, but I know he's playing against, lesser talent over there. But I'm definitely looking forward to seeing him in the summer league. Anybody else you're looking forward to seeing in the summer league?
Yeah, I mean, it should be a fun summer league. I think Moses Brown, who the Celtics just acquired in that Kemba Walker trade, will probably play. I think I would guess that Peyton Pritchard plays. I would guess that Aaron Nesmith plays. I wouldn't be shocked if Grant Williams plays. So there will be a lot of guys with NBA experience on that team. Madar obviously will be a guy that I think everyone's maybe most excited to see, just because he's kind of a man of mystery to a lot of the fans who haven't seen him play. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And then whoever they draft in the second round should also be on that team.
Well, thank you. I don't know if you guys are done, because I see it's about that time for Jay to get out of here. Barry, you look like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, just had a couple of quick questions. One basketball related and one not basketball related. So my first one is, who do you have in the NBA Finals, the Suns or the Bucks? And then the second question was, who do you think will be the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots Week 1, Cam Newton or Matt Jones? Yeah, I had to get those in. I know you're a Patriots fan of the Patriots guys, so I definitely wanted to get your opinion on who you think the starting quarterback will be for Week 1.
I've got to go Bucks in 6 still, because I said that before.
Oh, really?
The series.
Wow.
Really?
Only
Wow.
because I said it before the series.
He already said it.
Only because I got to stick by it. But Giannis is going to have to keep going crazy for that to happen.
Right.
And then
absolutely.
At this point, I'd probably say Suns in 6, but I can't do that. Can't go against myself. And then I'll go Cam Newton Week 1. Mac Jones will start Week 5. Week 5 is when he's going to
Week
start
5.
playing. I don't think he'll need too long. I actually like Mac Jones. I think he's going to be pretty good.
I think so too, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Mac Jones is going to be a pretty good quarterback and starter for us at some point, for sure.
Well, Jay, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. If you guys want to check him out, he's on Twitter @Jayking. All right, check him out. He's on The Athletic as well. I read a lot of that stuff, man. So that's where a lot of my
me too. I've been following.
comes from. So thank you, Jay, for coming on once again, man. And we'll hope to catch you another time.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks a lot for having me, guys. I appreciate it quite a bit.
All right, man.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. It was good hearing from you, my friend. It was good, having you on here and and talking Celtics and
yeah, can't wait to see you again at the games, man.
You. Yeah, definitely, man. Hopefully I can get back to the Garden for next year, so I can see you at the games. I'm trying to get back there, the start of next season. So if I do, hopefully I'll see you around for sure. But it was definitely good hearing from you. Appreciate your time and for coming on today.
Yeah, anytime, man. I'd love to do it again.
Oh, absolutely. No, you'll be back. We'll have you on again, definitely.
All right, thanks, fellas. Take care.
All right,
you too. Have a good one, Jay. Thanks, man.
Yeah, you too.
All right.
Great interview. Awesome.
It was, absolutely. Good content. Good stuff from Jay. Good insight.
Nah, Jay's that guy, man. If you, like I said, if you guys don't know who that is, man, make sure you find out.
Oh, John, believe me, I know who that is.
Not
John,
you. I'm talking to the audience, my friend. Make sure y'all find out and make sure you're subscribing to the channel, man, for sure. We're gonna keep bringing you guys, more big wigs in the league and in the industry, man. I mean, we working, so help us out and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on social media @profans_sports on Instagram and @profansports everywhere else. So until the next episode, man, we'll catch y'all.
Have a good one, everyone. See y'all next week.